Welcome back to For Community, creating community spaces so you can connect with others and also with God. I got a question for us today. How do we do Christmas this year? That's on my mind right now as I'm watching how my family is adapting to this new normal that we're setting into for this Christmas. You know, in years past, I've organized events, socials, potlucks, dinners, lots of fun stuff that's included lots of eating, and I'm really missing it right now because we're not doing that this year. This is the quietest Christmas season I have ever experienced. And in part that's good. I mean, we all need some downtime, but in another part, we've kind of lost our traditions. So what do we do this year? I'm doing things differently this year. My family's doing things different this year. And to be honest, I'm still wondering what this is supposed to look like now that we've lost some of our norms for this year. And what about you? How are you doing Christmas this year? Do you already see that things are different? Even though the kids are in still school, you're still working. We're not into the thick of really the Christmas season, those 2 weeks, before and after Christmas into the new year. Do you already see the changes? Do you already see that your life is different this year? Maybe like me, you're kind of a little sad about not being able to do things that you've done in the past, and you miss it like me, and you miss being around all the people like I do. Now, I'm a pretty extreme extrovert. I really miss people right now. Are you finding that it's a little bit too quiet this year, that it's a little bit too lonely this year? Okay, well, I've got something for us to consider. Let's go back to the very first Christmas, and let's consider how the wise men did Christmas. We're certainly not going to travel on camels to any destinations at all, and we're not going to be bringing gold and smelly stuff to people like the wise men did, but the wise men had a plan when there was no plan. They were able to come up with a plan. And so maybe there's something that we can glean from the wise men. We can mine the text of the wise men a little bit, Matthew chapter 2, verses 9 to 11, and see what the wise men did when there was no plan for what they were experiencing and what they had to do instead of leaning into tradition and just sort of making things up as they went along. Matthew chapter 2, verses 9 to 11. After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Hey kids, remember to keep your eye in the background because there's Christmassy stuff hidden back there. You try to figure out all the stuff that's back there so you can let us know what you saw in our next Zoom gathering. And also, please remember to watch the next episode of Connect HQ this week. In this video, I'd like to share a 2-part Christmas plan from the wise men to us. Well, it's my interpretation of what the text says anyways, and it's something I'd love to discuss this week the next time we get a chance to connect on Zoom. Part 1 of the 2-part plan that the wise men show us, it comes in the form of a question. What are you doing to focus on Jesus? I think that's where the wise men started their journey. What are we going to do to focus on Jesus? Now notice in the text that Joseph isn't mentioned. I mean, he plays a significant role in the narrative elsewhere, but not here. Mary isn't even the focus. I mean, Mary is in the text as the person who is with Jesus, but Mary is a secondary character. The primary character is the child. Once Jesus has been established as the center of the focus, they worship Jesus. And it's pretty clearly a sign that they saw him as a deity, a king from heaven who commands the stars to announce his birth. And it's in alignment with what we see in the rest of this gospel, the other gospels in the Bible. Only God is to be worshipped, not angels, not people, just God. The premise is upheld in this gospel, as in all the others, that only God is to be worshipped. So as the wise men come in and they worship Jesus, they are announcing that Jesus is God. Jesus is the center because Jesus is God. So let's turn this question around and talk about you for a moment. What's your center this Christmas? What's your center every day? Here, just plain honestly, I'm having a little trouble keeping Jesus at the center of this Christmas because my routines are off, my traditions are off. For me, I'm used to leading kids choir presentations, Christmas-themed Bible studies, Christmas parties at church, putting ads in local papers or in social media about celebrating Jesus' birth. But that busyness isn't there this year. It was the busyness that kept my attention on Jesus. But now without that busyness, as it's more quieter, what do I do? What do we do together to focus on Jesus? For community is not busy with how we're celebrating Christmas this year. So how do we keep the focus on Jesus? To add to that question, here's what I do see. I can see presents underneath my tree. I've got 4 kids. There are a lot of presents underneath my tree already. That's clearly a focus. But in what way do you keep Jesus at the center? In what way do I keep Jesus at the center when there's no more busyness of all the social gatherings and all the church stuff that we had been doing? What do we do in place of that busyness to keep Jesus at the center? Why don't we pause just for a second? Why don't you ask yourself that question? Whoever you're watching this video with, turn to that person, your spouse, your children, whoever that is, and ask the question, what are we going to do to keep Jesus at the center of this Christmas? I think this is a great question to explore in our next Zoom gathering this week. Remember, it's open mic. Everybody gets a chance to share. Let's look at the second part here of how the wise men celebrated Christmas when there was no plan originally, and they leaned into this event without any traditions to rely on. First, they treated him as royalty. And I think it's very important as you and I try to figure out what we're going to do this year to remember that Jesus is royalty. That's what all the gifts are for. It's like a nation dipping into the royal treasury to find something valuable, to show another sovereign how valuable they think that sovereign is, and that they wanted a friendship or they wanted to become a follower of that person. This is the recognition of a sovereign. More specifically, it's the recognition of the God-man. These are very, very valuable gifts. Second, they were relevant. Not only were they treating Jesus sovereign, but they're also giving him relevant gifts. Gold is valuable. Its sale is probably what funded Jesus' early years, particularly as they had to move back and forth from Egypt as they was trying to escape from Herod. Frankincense, trickier for me to figure out, but it looks to me like this is part of the recipe for the only kind of incense allowed to be used in Jewish worship ceremonies. So again, very, very practical. The gold was practical because it could be sold to fund their living. The frankincense is practical because it could aid in the form of worship that they had back when Jesus first came around. So we've got some financial leverage. We've got some spiritual leverage. Myrrh is a little different. Not really practical at all, actually. It was special for sure, but it looks like the only thing that the Jews really used for this was to help dead bodies from smelling too badly. Not very Christmassy at all, so I don't want to dwell on it too much. But I mean, the most obvious thing that stands out to me is a reflection about where Jesus is headed. Christmas and the cross are bookends of Jesus' life. He came as a gift to the world, but considered so worthless that they placed him in a wooden box in that manger, in that animal feed box to sleep. And then, although his life was a gift to the world, he's considered not only worthless, but despised and placed on a wooden cross. So that's myrrh. The wise men treated Jesus in the highest regard as one that towers over them, and then invited him into the world with practical gifts that helped him financially and spiritually to aid him also in his mission, which is to save the world on the cross. What about you? Does this help you figure out what you want to do this year? How can you acknowledge Jesus as one who towers above you and you know is worth more than anything to you? And how can you practically invite him into your world by making him part of your life? I think that's what it really boils down to. I think that's what the wise men are helping us see here. For me and for you, Jesus is both God and a person who is worth more than anything. So what can we do to show him how much we value him? And also for me and for you, every moment is like a minor moment of the incarnation. Not that he keeps getting born as a baby, but that he comes newly into the world to see if he'll be received. So what can you do practically to bring him into your world, into your home, into your work, into your neighborhood, into your friend circle, in order to make him incarnate to you and all around that you know. So let's wrap this up. To focus on Jesus this Christmas when things are not quite as clear and laid out and busy as years past, when most of our activities have been or are probably going to be canceled, at least here in Ontario. Figure out how you're going to esteem him as the thing that is most valuable to you, and then figure out how you're going to, very practically speaking, invite him into your world. I don't think that's easy, but I think it's worth a conversation. So let's make this part of our discussion the next time we connect on Zoom this week. If you're not able to connect with a local church, if you've lost your connection and you want to be reconnected, can I just encourage you to connect with For Community? We're online, we're flexible, we try to work around your schedule, so reach out so we can connect. That's it from me to you for now. For Community, creating community spaces so you can connect with others and also with God. Merry Christmas.